Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today, the tank review on the new Russian or Soviet heavy tank, the Object 279. And this is a very spacey looking tank, and it was kind of first available with the beginning of the event on the 1st of April 2020. It is accessible via an event, a grinding event, and I think you all are aware of how it works, and if not, I think there is a link in the video description down below. And it also will be soon available, I guess, on the marketplaces for astronomical prices, because this looks like a flying UFO, you know, Soviet bias, all written over it. But is it actually that good? Is it really actually an absolute monster machine? To be honest, this thing is pretty good. It's not overpowered, but it can look like it, and I want to talk you through why. I have the statistics and the comparisons available, everything, with some stunning gameplay in the background, and I think that this tank absolutely dominates when it is top tier, and it still can hold up enemies when it gets up tiered. On the other hand, then it really has to fear the firepower, if not even outright at its own battle rating. So I think that this tank shows more than any other tank what compression is really like. In a nutshell, it is like a high-tuned Soviet super duper mouse with a little bit of IS-7 elements, and the firepower is mostly like IS-7, but it's not as versatile as the T10M. So without further ado, let's go right into it. So again, I want to begin straight away with the armor, and there we can see that it has 4 tracks, and well, this might look like it's really unique, but it's also present on the T95, and that is really the most outstanding thing, that it is so high above the ground. So first of all, that really reduces the ground pressure, point number 1. If one of those 2 right hand side tracks is, you know, blown off or black, then it is counted as the entire right side being tracked. So much like with the T95, so you have all 4 tracks available for it to move. So this is not a feature that is unique to this tank, okay? It behaves like any other tank. It gets tracked, it stays where it is, but it can still turn around. Then we come to the hull, and the hull is, well, very round, and there you can see it's cast homogeneous armor, variable thickness armor, and the impact angle is highly, well, angled from roughly 55 to 70, 71 degrees, 75 depending on the exact place. And there you can see the armor dimensions at the point where I'm aiming are ranging from, depending where you're really looking, 320, 290, and the more you go to the edge, you know, the more it becomes ridiculously angled to thicknesses that are astronomically high. So the thing is, it depends really where you hit it. And again, versus normal shells, AP, some APFSDS rounds, some low panning heat rounds, you know, in the region of 250mm, they can get absorbed, okay, by the armor. And it is also pretty bouncy. The AP will very often just bounce off. And that is then one downside if you suddenly meet a tank that has enough penetration to go through your armor. That includes APFSDS of most kind. I think where it really starts to go through reliably is in the base pen value of 350, but some tanks will still bounce. Some tanks will go through with slightly less pen, depending on the normalization of the shell. And, you know, this is where you can absorb shells from the Orbital, 75 HVG, 74 HVG, and so forth. But you never can really angle. So if you are angled like this, right, and somebody shoots right here, yeah, that is just going through. That is still going through. But if then he hits you like here, it will bounce off, because then the armor, as you can see, goes astronomically high, 2.5 meters raw thickness. So that is the point number 1. And it goes all around. So even from the side, it is this high angle, this high peak, right? And this is pretty trolley, to be honest. And as you can see, very often people are used to aim here, but there is actually no hull. But behind this connecting part that connects the two tracks of both the left and the right side, there are actually fuel tanks inside. So that is a problem. If we then go to the rear, suddenly it is significantly flatter, roughly 70-60 millimeters thick. So a lot of tanks can pen you there, or at least you make you stationary, even SPA. But from the side and the front, it's highly angled. But at the end of the day, it is just cast homogeneous armor, and it is highly angled. And while it is really thick, it's not extremely super thick. So versus many shells, something like a mouse can angle. Something like an E100 has some side skirts that it can sometimes play with. But that is irrelevant because those two said tanks, they are so immobile. So we'll come to this in a moment. Then we come to the turret. And again, it is pretty good. Okay, and it's also very rounded. And it's resembling much of the approach to the armor like the hull. But here it is flat, 470 millimeters, and here the gun mantlet, 70 millimeters. Yeah, so that is pretty hefty, but ATGMs will go through. Another thing is that, for example, the cupola here, that actually can be penned even by SPA, even by Begleitpanzer's SAP shell. And then it will go through. And you know, Soviet tanks don't have the most amount of crew. Then also the side of the turret is pretty hefty. This can absorb at times heat shells from the RU-251, so the typical American 90mm HEATFS, right? But the back of the turret, not so much. So this is then where a lot of tanks then go through easily. Anything, practically. So again, from the front and the side, it's pretty bouncy, it's pretty thick, angled armor, but again, it's no composite, it's no spaced armor, and well, at this point, there is also this massive turret ring, and that can be also penned by everything that has somewhere of 80 millimeters of penetration. It might not look like it, but it actually has here this weak spot, and also the driver's edge. And then also very often shells ricochet from here directly into the gun breech or the gun barrel. So this is a tank that by its raw armor isn't invulnerable. Let's have a look at the X-ray, and we can see we have 4 crew members, the driver in the middle, typical Soviet fashion, and then we have the gunner and the commander, this time on the left hand side, if you look at it, the right hand side, with the loader here. One funny thing is, this looks a little bit like an autoloader, right, like from the French MX-50 series, but how do they load this gun? I have no idea. I really don't know how they bring in the shell and afterwards the propellant charges. I don't know. And as you can see, a lot of it is here stowed on the side of the turret, the back of the turret, and also the side of the hull. So it's pretty difficult to pen it and not damage it severely. But again, you can take out a lot of the ammunition. So, and then we can see here, as I said, the fuel tanks. And they are damaged from the front and the side relatively easily by any sort of ammunition that penetrates the outer hull, and then you're on fire. And as you can imagine, you only have 2 fire extinguishers, so that is pretty tricky. And also the gun breech is quite something. So, and it has a gun stabilizer. You know, when the armor is really trolley, but it depends on who really shoots you. And we have also a first raw look at the firepower. You know what? Let's go and talk about the rest of the statistics, shall we? I want to begin the direct comparison to some other tanks with the mobility aspect, and the Object 279 isn't really bad. So a 1000 horsepower strong engine in this comparison is the strongest, but amongst the weight it is also the heaviest, with the exclusion of the 100, which is in a league of its own when it comes to the weight, together with the mouse. So 60.4 tons heavy. That gives an overall horsepower to ton ratio of 16.6, which is actually the best in this comparison, together with the relatively low ground pressure thanks to the 4 tracks. That gives it, in certain circumstances, especially in a straight line, more of a medium tank feeling, which is also represented here with the second top speed of 55 kilometers per hour, only in this aspect second to the T95E1, which is the first tank that brought APFSDS into War Thunder. So only by 1 kilometer difference the top speed here. Then the reverse speed is also surprisingly good, very comparable to the mouse, and with 18 kilometers per hour in reverse, you might surprise them, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. The problem here is the lack of neutral steering. Why is this a problem? Well, because if you are especially in mud, or you are in some sort of slope, then turning the tank is extremely bad. You feel a lot of friction and you really have to play around it. So this is one of those downsides when it comes to the mobility. The maneuverability is not the greatest. The mobility is fairly good actually, but at this battle rating, a lot of tanks are equally or faster, the majority of them, and you come across a lot of wheel tanks that also throw darts at you. So this is where it again is right at the edge between the old guard tanks, where it is completely superior to, and kind of the new age tanks that just make it not look that overpowered. It's still pretty good, but again, in this comparison it is the best, but in the overall picture of this battle rating bracket in War Thunder, it is adequate, let's put it that way. Then we come to the firepower, and the highest caliber goes again here to the Object 279 with a 130mm M65 gun. 40 shells overall ammunition capacity, and the reload is a surprisingly quick 8.6 seconds. But this is not an autoloader, as you might have remembered from the X-ray review, and it is significantly better than both the T10M and also the E100. So you can see it is then in this aspect fairly comparable. It doesn't reach the insane levels of the AMX 50 Sur Blindé or the very respectable Chieftain Mark III's 7.5 second reload, and it's still roughly 2 seconds longer than the 6.7 from the high tier premium tanks. You have to keep this in mind, but it's not as slow as you might expect from first glance. The turret rotation speed with 18 degrees per second is also okay, and it is more, attributed to it being a heavy tank and the heavy armor, etc. But again, it has a stabilizer and are very good at this. However, the gun depression is only -5 degrees and the gun elevation 17 degrees. But to be honest, you shouldn't really try to work ridge lines with this tank in the first place, because that would really neglect the effect of the armor angling on the lower glacis then. And the elevation speed is with 4.5 degrees per second in this comparison the joint best. So you can see the tank is not bad. Now let's talk about the ammunition that this tank fires. The first of 2 shell types is the OF 482M high explosive shell. Muzzle velocity is 900 meters per second, which is fairly respectable, and with 2.65 kilograms of TNT, you have a 31 millimeters of penetration at any angle, at any distance, and this is usable, but it's not a LOL Ultra Pen high tier Soviet HE shell. However, there are targets where it might be useful, but it is not really that mandatory, and you should take only a handful of them with you. But there are situations where you have tracked the tank, you don't want to come around the corner, and then it is so fragile that you can probably hull break it with the high explosive shell, especially when it is a lightly armored vehicle, such as light tanks, armored cars, etc. So not bad, usable, but not really your primary shell. That title goes to the BR-482B APCBC round that has a 900 meters per second muzzle velocity and also penetrates up to 312 millimeters of armor. Thanks to its caliber, together with the interaction rules and some overmatch mechanics, you do not really bounce all that often, especially versus the more lightly armored tanks. And this then results with a pretty hefty post-penetration damage effect thanks to the 177 grams of TNT. Both mentioned shells are identical to the IS-7's ammunition. However, here I think you have a faster readout if I'm not completely wrong. And together with also the IS-7 as a secondary, coaxial 14.5mm heavy machine gun, which fires this kind of belt, I guess, because, you know, with 45mm of penetration, I killed some tanks with from the side that I couldn't with the other belts. So this information is not available to the stat card, but anyways. So what we can see here with the ammunition comparison is that the T10M has a very similar APHE, has a better HE, has APDS and HEATFS, and has also very similar mobility and also pretty good protection, but again it just simply falls to the likes of APFSDS and HEATFS or ATGMs in general. Also, the tank is by no means immune from bomb, but on the other hand, this tank just simply is very simplistic, so it needs all the tools that it actually has, and everything else would be a nice bonus, but then I think the point wouldn't really be there for medium tanks or light tanks. So I think that this tank is fun, it is dynamic, it is effective, but it is not unbeatable, and this is a rather surprising verdict when it comes to me reviewing this tank. And to be honest, it is then in this aspect very similar to the IS-7, which it shares together with the T10M the battle rating of 8.3. I think that when you have just lower battle rating tanks and they get up-tiered all the time, and in the upcoming days and weeks and months you will see more and more of these tanks, you don't really get the impression that this tank is balanced. On the other hand, if you have tanks that have just simply lolpan shells, then you kind of see what I'm talking about. And I think that the compression at this battle rating bracket really shows. This tank's battle rating cannot get lowered because then it would ruffle stomp even more, but it also can't be really heightened up to 8.7 or above, because then it wouldn't really have the niche where it really shines. But in other aspect, the further two things that are really important to know is this is not a premium tank, and when you get it from the event or on the marketplace, you'll get it stock, so you have to upgrade it. So the Silverline and RP income is comparable to the T10M, and therefore you can choose to put a talisman on it, but I wouldn't really recommend for it. The other aspect, how much is this tank worth? Well, surprisingly enough, I would give it something in the region of 30-40 euros. If you really love the unique look, if you are a collector, then go with 50, maybe 60. But everything above is just a typical War Thunder marketplace insanity. And the tank is good, it is fun, it is effective, but it is not safe from future power creep, and that Gaijin will nerf it in the future, or you know how it has been with premium tanks and also with event tanks in the past. They were really great and fun when they came out, but then over time they kind of degraded and you really couldn't point your finger at exactly why. So this is the direct comparison, the review. Let's have a look at the gameplay. And we're opening up with the 4th kill, beautiful side shot here on the Chieftain Mark III, and now I think I have secured the middle of the map. Okay, and I flanked the enemy team through the middle, which is always absurd if you say it, but some maps like this Cyanide map, they just play out like this. So this is more like the job of a medium tank, right? This aggressive going forward and just trying to get some easy kills of unaware tanks. That's a little bit of the medium tank job. But that you actually can do this in this tank, again, is one of of its strength, that it not just only has this big old gun and the fantastic armor when, you know, it matters, again, if you don't face high pen HEATFS and also APFSDS, then the armor is great. And so I want to make use of it. And this leads me now to this rather reckless gameplay style. I wouldn't really do this if I would play the tank for myself, but I just want to get some scenes and I want to test the armor, and so I go forwards. High risk, high reward. And the one time I don't really look around, it happens. A missile barely misses me. I get punished by 25mm shells or 30mm shells. I get the kill on the warrior. Another missile misses me, and that was already too much action for my taste. And as I said it, a third missile misses me. Again, this was really lucky. It could have ended right here, right there, because as good as the tank's armor is, missiles, you know, with 400, 600, 700 millimeters of penetration, up to 900 with the Raketenjagdpanzer 200, you know, the armor cannot really withstand that, except if it's hitting at the very edge of an armor plate at an extreme angle. Yeah, then maybe. But here I see that an easy kill here on an M13. I cannot really resist. And so that is kill number 6 already. So we have the ace, we are still alive. And look at this, there are now 3 tanks with me. And just see how this goes for those tanks. So I see some action, and I could go on through around the rock on the right hand side, but then I would be exposed to the tanks from their spawn. And maybe I catch them a little bit unaware. 2 M103s, beautiful tanks, beautiful side cheeks. Yeah, baby, that's what I want to see. And this is where then this big room of the M103, the huge amount of crew, doesn't really matter if you penetrate the tank right there with this high caliber APHE round. This is really the strength, the satisfying one shot, one kill scenario. And now we can see another feature, as I said, this beautiful maneuvering in a straight line, forwards and backwards. Good reverse speed as well as forward speed. The ground pressure, you really feel that there is not that much ground pressure, but there is a lot of friction, as I said, if you try to turn the hull. Talking about the hull, it is much wider than you think, and very often I got stuck on places where I didn't expect it. So because the hull also extends over the side of the tracks, if you will. So a beautiful easy shot here on the Centurion Action 10, the British premium tank, and that is kill number 8. So looking really cool, looking really easy, right? The question is, can I now get the M103, the second one? Because if he has, oh, sorry, I was distracted with kill number 9. If he has the HEATFS, he has a good chance of penning me. And maybe not at the very beak of the wedged hull, but maybe a little bit in the region of the driver's hatch. This is where the 380mm HEATFS then has a good chance. So the tank has just fired, and he just rammed the rock, and that then rocked him down, and that let the shell bounce, because then it hit the armor plating that I didn't want to hit. Okay, that's a bit of a bad thing here, but it doesn't really matter. I still have the faster reload than the M103, and I saw another tank right there, but sadly I missed. So as you can see, I also have 3 HE rounds, but in this battle I haven't used them. But they would have been really useful here, but it doesn't really matter. The heavy machine gun couldn't penetrate the T92, but the AP without the shadow of a doubt could. And that is the 10th kill. Double ace. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And again, I can just simply reposition faster than the majority of other heavy tanks, or the majority of even medium tanks. So let's just have a look. Again, this is really tricky to work with. And the question is if you can get here the M103. I aimed a bit higher and I hit actually the gun barrel. So that was useful. And now he should be mine, really. And I could go here for the turret ring, but again I tried here the lower glacis, but again it ricocheted. So now I'm at the end of my patience. I get also hammered by an SPA. And sadly my heavy machine gun magazine was out. I aim for the cupola, and that's the charm. That always works. Good stuff right there. Another kill. That should have been kill number 11. And then in the open, I see some action. What is that? That is an M50 Ontos, not really killing me here. And that was another hull break. And then another gifted kill comes here in the shape of a Chieftain Marksman, kill number 13. And from that point onwards, it was just a lot of airstrikes that I gladly survived. And I actually ran out of ammunition, but there was no more action, no more kills. The battle went on for a further 5 minutes. At the end, we captured the enemy cap. And yeah, just a few seconds too late, the Vampire FB5 scored a triple kill. Now let's have a look at the post-battle results, and we can see 94,000 civilians and nearly 11,000 modification research points without boosters, just a premium account. Together with the Survivor and the Heavy Metal Hero Award, overall the achievements made a quarter of the overall income. This is not a premium tank, keep this in mind. Don't pay for it astronomical numbers on the marketplace. It is worth something between 30 to 50, at max 60 Gaijin coins, but no more, and that only if you're a collector. It is a cool tank, it is uniquely designed, it looks like a UFO, it has its moments, but again, it feels only overpowered when it is working against some lower battle rating old school tanks, where it combines the firepower, the armor, and the mobility that just all those former tanks have to trade off, versus the new meta tanks that fire APFSDS, HEATFS, missiles, etc. from autoloaders and stabilized gun systems with high penetration. Don't rely on your armor, but you still have the firepower, the stabilizer, and the mobility to work with. So I think this is kind of a little bit like an IS-7, believe it or not, and so this is the tank for you. A fun, reliable tank at the moment, but nobody guarantees you that it will get nerfed in the future or increased in battle rating, and I guarantee you that there is more feature and more power creep in this battle rating in the upcoming patches. So finally, that's it for me today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the waves, in the skies, and on the battlefields of War Thunder.